It's been quite a while since I've been able to do the Monster Hunt, but of course, we're finally back to being able to, because it's finally on PC. Michael here with a PC overview of Monster Hunter World, which has finally made its way to PC, and it's a fairly decent port once you get it set up. It does not run on low-end machines, so if you have a low-end machine, do not expect to run this game whatsoever. If you have a mid-range machine, expect to run it alright, maybe console quality, and if you have a high-end machine, don't expect to max it out, because it does allow you to go pretty high with the graphics. It doesn't seem like there's very many optimization issues. There's a few issues with screen space, fog, and stuff like that, which we'll talk about a little bit later, which is a little bit more intensive than I think it should be, so maybe there is some performance problems, but it's specific to specific settings and kind of the way they configure it. It doesn't really tell you exactly how intensive something is and how much it should actually decrease and increase based on your specs, because the presets also don't change these settings accordingly either. If you go into a low setting, it has some quality settings that are on high, even though it really shouldn't be. Anyways, that's something they can fix and patch. But yeah, we're going to be talking about Monster Hunter World on PC today. We're going to be mostly talking about the PC port and its performance and settings and how it looks and everything, and its differences from console if I possibly can. I didn't own this on console, so I can't really speak too much on that, but I will try from what I had seen. And of course, if you're interested in my impressions of the game, or if you want to just see gameplay, you can go ahead and skip ahead. But first off, we're going to go into the options and talk about the PC port. So first off, we got display settings. So we actually got brightness and, of course, obviously, screen mode settings. We get our full screen, windowed mode, and borderless mode, as you would expect. I'm currently running it in borderless mode. OBS is having problems capturing this game in full screen, as it does in pretty much every game, so you'll notice I record a lot of stuff in borderless. And the problem with this game is it caps out my CPU and GPU pretty dang often, and so every once in a while, OBS just freaks out and drops my frame rate. I've had this problem in a few other games, and OBS just hasn't updated to fix that yet, so I'm sorry if my frame rate drops in the capture of the footage. I am running the game at 60 FPS for the most part. I'll mention when I end up having some good drops or something like that. Normally it's when a lot of particle effects go on screen, like when I collect flowers and things like that, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Resolution setting, it supports a nice decent selection of resolutions. However, some people are recording that they are getting black borders, and so basically if you're running at anything that is ultra wide or outside of the range of the resolutions you see here, then you're probably going to get black borders, and there's nothing you can really do about it. You can stretch it, but then that looks ugly, and I don't recommend it. Frame rate cap is uncapped, which is pretty dang nice, but you can cap it to 60 or 30. If you want to cap it to anything else, you're going to have to use an external program or your graphics driver settings. VSync, I have it on because I hate tearing. And then you have the graphics settings. Now, this is going to be your presets right here, and the presets are not good at all. If you set it on the low, there's some settings that should not be on the setting that they're at. For example, the level of detail bias, which is something you'll want to drop, especially on a lower end machine. And I had to drop it, and none of these graphic settings drop it below high, which is weird to me because it's one of the most intensive things that you can actually have in the graphic settings. But of course, you can change everything. Advanced graphic settings here. So you get resolution scaling, which is going to be the percentage of the resolution that it ends up rendering. It doesn't really tell you what they are at. High is your base, as in whatever resolution you set it to is what it'll render at, so keep it at that most of the time. But if you are having trouble running the game, you can try to drop it a little bit. We don't know what these are. This could be 50, 75%, I don't know. I'm gonna assume this is 75 and this is 50%, but it also has some variable settings as well. And you'll notice this through a few of the options as well, to where it'll actually vary depending on what you want. So for example, resolution scaling has one where it'll try to keep resolution as best it can to hit your frame rate cap. And then it also has one to where it's like, oh, it's gonna try and keep that frame rate as high as possible while adjusting the resolution. Now, all these variable settings have caused stuttering in games in the past. I haven't messed with them too much because I've just had such a bad experience. I just didn't waste my time, but it is there if you want to end up trying it. Normally, they don't work very well, but of course, it's there. It's nice to have the option. Texture quality, you can drop down pretty dang low if you want to. Ambient occlusion, we don't know what settings this is, but I have it on medium on my GTX 1070 system and my 6700K Intel i7 CPU. I should probably mention that earlier, and it is installed on an SSD. I forgot to set my settings earlier, or my system setup earlier, but I have a fairly high-end system, but some of these options I had to drop pretty dang low. So for example, volume rendering quality, this is basically fog and the screen fog, and it also affects the colors of the game. Now, some people hate this effect, so you can literally just turn it off if you don't like it, but I have it on low because I actually like the color grading and the way it kind of affects things. Turning it on high actually didn't affect the visuals all that much. I noticed some weird phasing and stuff like that when characters were in the distance that kind of look cool, but for the most part I just left this on low, and it doesn't really have that big of a hit on your performance. But if you don't want that, it was about 5 frames for me when I ended up having this on low. If I turn it off, I get those 5 frames back, but it's not enough for me to actually, because I like the effect, it's not enough for me to care, but it defaults to high. Turn it down to low, at least. If not, turn it off, because that is hugely performance heavy. Shadow quality, we don't necessarily know what this is, and honestly, mid looks pretty dang good too. So if you want to inch out a little bit of performance, set it on mid, and then high. Pretty dang good. It seems like it also affects how many objects are casting shadows as well, as in when you set it down to medium or especially low, you actually end up noticing some objects' shadows kind of merge together. So there's some kind of weird issues there, which is kind of weird when you're on low and mid settings, because I did play on mid for a while. So there are some graphical glitches you'll run into when you're on mid, but when you're on high, don't notice anything. Anti-aliasing, you get TAA and FXAA, no idea what quality, and they both meh. TAA looks good, but it's performance heavy, and then FXAA is surprisingly performance heavy, and it looks like crap. So I just ended up turning it off. It's not worth keeping on. And then level of detail bias. This is how far things will actually pop in, as in your pop in level of detail. Now it defaults to high, which is basically what it's going to do is it's just going to set it so that everything renders at its highest resolution to polygon count and texture as possible if it's in your field of view, which is incredibly intensive, especially when you get into the forest areas of the game, because there is a ton of foliage in this game. In comparison to the console version of the game, there's about like 3 times more foliage, especially from the videos that I've seen and the comparisons that I've been talking to people about. So basically, if you're having trouble running the game, I also recommend, especially with the volume rendering quality, actually dropping this down to medium will actually work. And if you're on a low end or mid-range machine, you can actually turn this on low, which is about where the console quality was. And so things will pop in, but it's not nearly as noticeable as you would expect it on medium. So that's fairly decent. So even if you're actually using presets, set this setting yourself, because it doesn't change it in any of the presets that I ended up seeing. They could obviously patch that, but of course. And then max level of detail, you can actually just set it so it uses the absolute lowest quality model, which I guess if you're on a low-end machine, you could try it. Foliage sway, didn't notice performance hit. Same thing with subsurface scattering, which makes skin look nice and pretty. Screen space reflections, this is stuff that kind of reflects light and things like that. It didn't really affect my performance. Same thing with aniso. Water reflections is pretty dang heavy in certain areas, especially with waterfalls and stuff like that. So you can end up turning this down if you're in the jungle and having problems with that. SH diffuse quality, I have no idea what this is. I apologize. I have it set to medium. I don't even know if it makes a difference. I didn't notice any quality difference anywhere in the game when I ended up changing this around, so I have no idea what it does. Dynamic range, you can set it to 64-bit. I doubt anybody has a display for that, so I have it on 32. And then Z prepass, which basically does depth calculations and stuff like that. And it's basically leave it on because most systems are going to be able to handle it. Quick editor note, I forgot to mention that you can't disable the motion blur or depth of field in the game. It's not really that big of a deal because I haven't really noticed it all that much. There is some blurring when you're like in fast motion and stuff like that, and there's definitely depth of field. However, everything still looks perfectly clear. Now, the problem with that is the fact that it could, again, be a performance hit, which makes it more difficult to run on low-end machines. So not being able to turn that effect off is kind of a big deal. However, they use it for a lot of effects in game, and they also use it for a lot of the cutscenes and stuff like that. I didn't really talk too much about the cutscenes either in the entirety of this video, since this is afterwards. So real quick, the cutscenes they look okay, but they end up changing some of your graphic settings when they go into it. So for example, if you turn off the fog and everything, I forgot what it was called. I'm editing right now, sorry. But when you end up turning off the fog or whatever, it actually turns that back on for some of the cutscenes. So keep that in mind that some of the cutscenes might actually drop your frame rate during the cutscene just because it changes the graphic settings while we're going into it. And sometimes it changes your brightness and stuff like that. So it's a little bit strange, but it's not really that big of a deal, to be honest, because you see the cutscenes once and then you probably never look back at them unless you're really enthralled by the story for whatever reason. And those are your advanced settings. Now, when it comes down to audio settings, you also have multiple volume sliders, which is pretty dang nice. Oh, I forgot to change this onto wide range. There we go. Yeah, so you can actually change it. So you can actually change the way that everything goes on. And so you can actually turn on and off voice chat in the setting as well. I wish there was an online option inside the thing. I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, you get multiple volume sliders. You get a dynamic range. Consoles are normally in narrow or mid-range. So if you're on a TV set or something like that, I am on, my computer and everything with my good headphones. So I have wide range here, and you can actually set it to headphones. So there you go. And then 3D audio is kind of nice. Yeah. And then obviously for your other stuff, you get languages, which you can actually set the voice and the text differently. And it doesn't seem like it's region locked or anything like that, which is super, super nice. You get your subtitles. And of course, you actually get your interface stuff as well. So you can actually make it so that there's a large. So if you're on a screen really far away, and so like, let's say you're projecting it to a TV screen or something like that, you can go into large, which will make the UI gigantic in my opinion. So I'll go ahead and leave it on default there. And you can also change your confirm button. So there you go, to B and A. And subtitle text size as well. And that is mostly that. You can also rebind absolutely everything and double bind as well. However, I don't see any option to rebind the controller. And the problem with the controller is that it does a lot of things to where one button ends up doing a lot of stuff. So for example, right here, to lower level preview armor, equipment info, and stuff like that. That's talking about different menus, like, because this is menu navigation when you go into melee and stuff like that. The problem is some of these keys will do multiple things while held down or clicking them or holding down 2 different keys at the same time, which isn't too much of a problem for the keyboard specifically, because you can rebind pretty much everything. It seems like I don't think you can unbind everything. I haven't really mess with the keyboard and mouse all that much because I'm using a controller. By the way, the menus do have full mouse control as well, although the mouse does lag a little bit. We'll talk about that in a second. But for the controller, there's a lot of double binds you can't rebind or anything, and that can be a little bit frustrating if you're using a custom controller. Such as if you're using a Steam controller, there may be some actions that just aren't available because you don't have the buttons for it, which is a little bit frustrating. So it would have been nice to be able to rebind our gamepad buttons. And in fact, what you're supposed to do is go into your Steam overlay and set it into your gameplay or your Steam settings. Now I'm going to go ahead and exit out of here because we're done with that. Now, to talk about the port a little bit, there are a few problems that end up coming into play. I'm going to go ahead and load in my game so I can be wandering around. It's going to force me into, there's my Ms. Kill-A-Lot and my Kitty Chesko. But yeah, it tries to force you into this online thing. I'm just going to go ahead and create a private session. I'll talk about the online stuff a little bit later, but I haven't really been able to play online all that much because the servers are completely botched at launch. But talking about the port problems, now immediately you'll notice when you end up getting into the game that your controller may not work if you're trying to play with a controller. Oh god, my frame rate is dead. Okay, I might have to try and swap over to full screen and see if it actually still captures. Let's see if it kills my capture or not. Well, okay, it's sort of working. All right, well, OBS says it's working fine now. I'm just gonna hope like hell that I'm not like dropping a bunch of frames. So my game is not running at 60 FPS right now. So we're gonna go ahead and go into the options to actually turn something down real quick. Now, one thing to mention is you can't actually change some of the options when you get into it, and when you actually start up the game, it'll start off this hour-long tutorial, and to where basically it just won't allow you to actually change a lot of the options, stuff like that. Here's the actual live detail thing, so you can actually see in the background it actually changes things too. They're absolute minimal quality there, but it doesn't actually let you change a lot of these settings, and you actually can't even access this menu after a while. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop the quality. Oh my god, none of these things are actually improving my frame rate. That one is. But I like the effect. You can actually see the effect in the background as well. So if you're interested in that. Yeah, that's a little bit unfortunate. So it seems like I'm going to be recording at a low resolution. Can I not change literally anything else? NSO has no effect. Don't know what that does. Apparently not. So apparently I'm going to be capturing at a low frame rate. I apologize for this. I don't know how to fix it because, yeah, I guess I'm just going to have to turn this off. That's literally my only option to capture this game. So I apologize. I like the effect. It's kind of like this blue fade thing, but it seems like something about it is messing with OBS because now it's capturing at 60 FPS. Now I'm running it at 60 FPS. So I guess I just needed that another budge of performance. So there you go. That's how close I am to actually completely maxing out my system while playing this game with the volume fog on. So keep that in mind. Anyways, port problems. There we go. We're actually finally going to get to it at 12 minutes into the video. I apologize for that. You might notice that your controller might be not be working when you actually end up getting into the game. And the problem with that is the fact that it actually uses the Steam API for a lot of its effects. So when you end up going into the game, it'll expect Steam to actually tell it like, hey, this is how you're using the controller. And the problem with that, I'm just going to go back to the default camp that you actually start at, so I'm not spoiling too much of the game. I'm not very far in the game, by the way. I've just been playing it for a few hours. Gonna go ahead and depart. I am in an online lobby, and it will say I'm talking up there because I have my voice chat on, so that's gonna be a cool little effect. But yeah, it uses the Steam API to actually detect if you have a controller or not. The problem is, if you, yep, I'm on a private party. I don't need to wait for anybody. Sorry, I've never actually tried to have an online lobby because it keeps disconnecting me. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, so it tries to ask Steam like, hey, is it using a controller? And you're supposed to rebind it through there. But the problem is you have to launch it into big picture mode first. And so to be able to use my controller in game, I had to launch the game in big picture mode. And then I had to go back into it. Am I just in an exploration or is this actually a mission? Oh, this is actually a quest. Cool. I want my stuff. So basically I had to launch the game in big picture mode, and then after I closed big picture mode, I was able to go back into it and just kind of do whatever I wanted. Also, I've never seen rain in this game, so this is new. Hopefully dinos don't show up because they're mean. And so, yeah, a lot of people were saying like, oh, this game doesn't have controller support. And no, you just have to launch it through Steam Big Picture. It actually says it on the forums. There's actually a sticky post by the developer saying like, hey, by the way, use the Steam API. So go to your setting in Steam and enable your controller, which for me, I just had to start it up in Big Picture mode once. And now it works because it has individual portfolios for each of the actual, games that it actually has on its categories or whatever. So there you go. I'm just going to be wandering around on the outside. Now, another problem with the game is actually its keyboard and mouse support. Now, my mouse, you might notice that the camera all of a sudden started looking a little bit weird. The mouse movement for the camera is completely botched and not really useful. So what they ended up doing is, instead of actually making it so that it had native support, now the gameplay wise is completely fine. So I'm actually able to use combat and stuff like that with the keyboard and mouse. I'm switching back to a controller, by the way. Whoops. But it actually works perfectly fine in gameplay, except for the camera, which is trying to emulate the motion of a controller, which is just not good. And so, yeah, basically, because of that, because I like to use the camera so much and I move around so much, that is going to cause some problems for me gameplay-wise, and I just will not be able to handle that. That is something that I absolutely hate in games, and the mouse in the menus as well ends up lagging quite a bit. Aside from that, everything seems to have full mouse support and full keyboard support, and everything seems to work perfectly fine, except for that one specific problem to where the mouse just feels like it's lagging all the time when it comes down to the camera. Nothing like button clicks or anything like that are delayed. It's just the camera, which to me is a killer. Now, I was obviously going to play this with a controller anyways, because that's how I play 3D action games, but that is annoying to anybody who doesn't have a controller or is having problems with the Steam API and the controllers just are not working, which is something that can very, very easily happen. So keep that in mind when you get into the game if you end up picking it up to, yeah, it's a little bit bothersome. And a lot of people were saying that it just doesn't have controller support, which is false. It does. It just doesn't work all the time, and it's just a little bit super, super annoying. Now, the final problems that I've had with the port itself, again, none of these problems with the port are killer for me. Nothing that actually destroys the game specifically. The major problem that I've run into, aside from keyboard and mouse support, I guess, is some problems people could end up having with it, of course, because if they don't have a controller, then they can't actually get around it because they don't have a controller to actually get around the problems with. Regardless, back on topic, the one that actually does affect me pretty heavily is actually nothing to do with the game itself, and oh, is that a giant dragon bird thing? It is. I need to put away my weapon. Is actually the online play. So the game is launched. I've gotten into one lobby and I was able to walk around with them a little bit, and then we disconnected, and then I've never been able to get back into another game lobby again. The online multiplayer is working, and people who have been able to get into lobbies say that it has no lag or anything like that. The problem is the matchmaking lobbies are completely busted at launch, and it is constantly disconnecting people over and over again. So for example, I'll go in and try to join my friend or something, it just says this game doesn't exist. Or I'll say like, oh yeah, your friend invited you, and they'll say click to join. It's like, game does not exist, or completely failed to disconnect to server, and then I'll just end up getting disconnected completely from the game. And then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, you know, you're not online anymore. Would you like to connect to online? Go to the quest counter, and et cetera, et cetera. He just swallowed him up. All right, lovely. So yeah, the online is kind of botched at the moment. Now, people have said it works perfectly fine. I unfortunately have not been able to test it out all that much. It does have some quirkiness, just like it did on console. They didn't fix any of the problems that were on the console version, to where, for example, if you're in a story mission or something, like a story quest, if all players have not seen the cutscene throughout the mission, then it will just end up not allowing you to connect to the game, which is super, super annoying, and it doesn't actually tell you why you're not able to connect. It will just say unable to connect, does not meet requirements, but it doesn't actually tell you what those requirements are, especially if you're at the same spot in the story. It's a little bit annoying. And so to fix that, what you have to do is go into your own game, view the cutscene, and then join one or the other inside of the lobby. So everyone has to see the cutscene before it counts as completed, and then you're able to join other people's lobbies that are in that same mission. Now, my recommendation is just always join the player that's behind, and then you won't have a problem with it. That's my recommendation. But I can't even get into multiplayer lobbies, so what do I know? Other than that, yeah, you can find lobbies and stuff like that, but it's pretty rare. The server, for the most part, is just saying that there's no lobbies available right now because, again, it's botched, and I'm not the only one having this problem. A lot of people are actually having this problem, so yeah, it's not particularly great, and it's kind of unfortunate, especially at launch, and I believe consoles actually had this problem as well. I remember a lot of people talking about it originally on the console release. They're like, yeah, I can't really join lobbies or anything, and it took like an hour for me and my friend to get into the lobby, so yeah. Another problem with the game, of course, is, again, this isn't exclusive to the PC version, but this is just, he destroyed that log. What a jerk. Another problem with the game is it starts off with an hour-long tutorial. Like I said earlier, you're not able to change your graphic settings while in this tutorial, and so this actually runs into a problem when you're trying to set things up, especially for me, to where I'm like, all right, I'm going to try and set everything to max just so I can actually do it for a performance review, you know, see how well it runs. By the way, I can run everything on max. I just get about 45 FPS, including the fog that I was talking about. Now, I probably wouldn't be able to capture it very well, but of course, that is how things go. And so, yeah, this is one of those problems where I had it on max, and so I was running the game at like 25 FPS or something like that, because the game actually had a weird glitch with some of the graphic settings to where if you change it, it tells you that you have to reboot your game, and then it doesn't, and I didn't. And so I was an idiot. So if it tells you that it needs to reboot its game, then why the hell are you here? Freaking Mr. Bird. I am just having problems. By the way, this game has multiple monsters that show up and screw over your lunch. But yeah, so basically, I ran into some bugs when I was starting it off, and you can't actually skip the tutorial. It forces you to go through it, and it's really, really annoying because it's like an hour long. That said, though, because that was a lot of negatives to this game, the positives of this game is it's freaking fantastic. Obviously, it looks amazing on PC. The foliage and stuff like that has been greatly improved. There's a lot of higher resolution models. There's not so many on textures, at least not from what people have been saying. A lot of people that played it on console as well are saying that some of the textures are about the same quality, but being able to play it at full resolution, you know, not fake 4K to where they just upsample 4K, which always looks terrible. All right, I need to run because this guy will eat me. Goodbye. I love the running animation when you're running from something too. It's like, oh God. Yeah, so basically the game is fantastic and it looks much better than the console version of the game, and it runs at 60 FPS. Pretty solid once you get everything set up. Now, I'm running it at a solid 60. It is dropping a little bit here and there, especially when with all this rain effects going on and stuff like that. The rain doesn't look as good as I wanted it to, so that's a little bit unfortunate. I'm just following this guy to wherever the hell he's going because I want to eat his tail. Actually, more specifically, I want to use it for a weapon, but you know what I'm saying. But yeah, so the game itself, I freaking love it. It's Monster Hunter. I've always loved the Monster Hunter games. However, I haven't really been able to play all that many. So it's kind of nice to actually have it on PC. And again, the port is pretty good once it's set up. It has some annoyances, but none of the annoyances really destroy the experience, with the exception of the online problems we're having right now, which is something that will probably end up being fixed. Oh, I'm hitting the wrong button. There we go. Boom. I'm still getting used to the weapon. I'm using the Charge Blade, by the way, which is easily my favorite weapon because I both like swords and axes. And I like the idea of charging it up and shocking the living hell out of things, but I will probably end up swapping around weapons and trying to figure out what's going on with everything as well. You can actually swap between weapons pretty freely as well. At the beginning of each mission, you can just be like, oh, I want to use this weapon now, and then just kind of swap to it and stuff. So yeah, the game itself is fun, and it says that it's open world. It's really not. And so what it is basically just large instances to where it's like, oh yeah, by the way, it's got this one giant area, and then in that area, you got a bunch of different sort of monsters and stuff like that that can be in there, and then you kind of fast travel to the different locations. So it's not specifically open world. If you've never seen this game, it is what you would expect from a Monster Hunter. It's much more fluid and much more fast-paced than a lot of the previous Monster Hunters that I've played, and you actually get your little furry companion. The customization isn't particularly amazing. It's got a bunch of presets and stuff like that, and they did a bunch of microtransactions for, well, not really microtransactions. What they are is actual DLC. So you actually buy it, and then you can change it whenever you want. So it's not microtransactions specifically, and I actually don't mind it all that much, but some people were kind of annoyed with that, the fact that it had a bunch of cosmetic DLC on day one. One thing to mention, though, is that the updates on the PC version are behind, as in we are what the game actually had at launch on console at the moment. However, updates are supposedly going to be sped up a little bit for us, so we will be able to catch up. So in the future, this won't actually be a problem. And again, most of these problems could end up being fixed with patches, and I believe there are some optimization issues they probably have with the fog and stuff like that, which I actually like the fog a little bit, and so it's a little bit unfortunate not to have it because it adds a lot of detail to a lot of the areas and a lot of atmosphere. Some people do say that it looks a little bit more saturated without it, and I will 100% agree with that, but I also kind of like the way they did the effect where it's kind of a little bit desaturated and everything. I don't think I broke his skull for his thing. I did not. Ugh. He looks so sad and dead. Anyways, yeah, so overall, I like the game. I think it's really freaking awesome, and obviously it's gotten glowing reviews for a reason. There's a lot of people that end up liking it, and it is a fantastic game, and the PC port specifically is also pretty dang good. You just have to get by those problems. And the problem with a lot of the user reviews and things like that right now especially is the fact that a lot of people aren't understanding what they have to do to actually get the item to go. Wow, he's talking over me, and so I'm getting distracted, to get the game to run properly. And a lot of the presets are to blame for that. The fact that the presets don't drop the level of detail distance is a big deal, because that is going to heavily affect your performance, because this game is CPU heavy out the bazoo. And so basically, if you're on a low-end machine, no matter what settings you change, if you don't drop your level of detail, you're gonna all of a sudden notice frame drops everywhere because it's just not going to be able to run on your system because your CPU is not able to handle the number of objects on screen, especially with the number of polygons. Other than that, though, everything looks fantastic. It looks like a modern game, although there are some textures that could definitely use some work, especially when you get into town and some of the cutscenes and stuff like that. You can definitely see where it could have been improved. But again, it's not something I'm necessarily going to complain about because I want the game to run. I don't really care if it looks amazing or anything along those lines. And once I'm done with this video, I'll probably will end up turning on those rays again or the fog and everything. And so, yeah, that is the thing. Oh, I'm tracking the bird. I don't want to track the bird. That bird will eat me. Or is that my quest? Is that my quest to kill this thing? Oh, Jesus criminy. All right, bring it on. I'm gonna murder your face. Also, the game can't pause. So me starting this fight while I'm recording is a really, really bad idea. So, yeah, I guess I'll fight the bird for a little bit here. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this one. And of course, you can end up leaving your thoughts below in the comments section. If you ended up playing this game on console, do make sure to mention your thoughts below on what you actually think of the game on the PC version, if you end up picking up the PC version as well. Maybe you haven't played it, or maybe you've actually played the PC version and you have some other things to add on to this video and stuff like that. Make sure to leave those in the comments as well. I always love to see that when people are like, oh yeah, by the way, you missed this or something like that. It adds value to the video and it makes sure that people that are looking up things don't have to look at 20 different sources to get absolutely everything, because again, I haven't really been able to try the online play. So if you have the game and you've actually been able to play it online, definitely let me know how that's going. He just ate a fly because I just haven't been able to try it, which is a little bit unfortunate because I really wanted to play this game online. It's kind of fortunate that none of my friends ended up jumping online to play or weren't able to pick it up right away, because it would have been unfortunate to spend my, few hours of play just trying to connect to online lobbies instead of actually playing the game. Fortunately, I've just been playing solo. I did try for a little bit to join online lobbies, but it wasn't that big of a deal. Of course, if you like my styles of content, you can also check out my website at michaelpstanich.com, and you can also check out my gaming Discord called the Broken Chat Box. If you end up wanting to play Monster Hunter World online with people, you can end up jumping in there and talking to people. There's not too many people in our group that have it, because it did just launch, and I think it's still a niche game. Everyone's still playing the games they have been playing. And I'm like, why are you guys playing Monster Hunter World? Like, come on, guys, it's out. Like, are you serious? So, yeah, that's a little bit strange to me. But, again, maybe I'm a niche gamer. This is what I like. But yeah, I enjoy the game, so if you're actually looking for something, then yeah, it's definitely worth the hunting of the world, and I'm definitely looking for people to play with. I just really hope they fix up the matchmaking and stuff like that a little bit sooner rather than later. Oh, I keep forgetting I gotta charge my blade, and then I can use it. Jesus Christ, I love this game though. It is fantastic, and it's installed on my SSD because I will be playing it over and over again, and I'll probably have it running in the background of a lot of videos if I can get it capturing properly. Like I said, thank you guys so much for watching, and oh my god, he just spit on me! Oh my god, I'm gonna get eaten by a bird. It's like Jurassic. So it just flew away. I didn't think it could actually fly. I'm just calling it a bird because I had feathers. Today I learned.